everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing something a little different than just sitting in front of the computer doing a normal coding tutorial. I'm actually about to get ready to go to work my normal 9 to 5, but before I did it, I felt I wanted to jump on and record a quick video to kind of talk about a topic to kind of help some of my newer programmers and those that are learning to code out. So if you're in the process of learning to code, you're probably wanting to graduate from HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then pick up a particular React framework, if you will, or JavaScript framework, I should say, to kind of help with that coding journey from a web development perspective. So if you're like me, the first framework I learned was React. And the crazy thing about it is the hardest thing for me to learn when I initially started out was how to get the doggone thing installed, man. I was installing it in the wrong directory. I'm getting weird errors in my terminal. I'm thinking there's something wrong with the server itself, and come to find out once I sat down, spent some time to really learn it, realized that it was on me. Following a coding tutorial that was kind of, it had the best intentions, but it just didn't meet my needs, quickly helped me realize that, hey, I need to take a different approach. So if you're somebody that kind of struggle with learning a framework or learning to code in general, graduating from one technology to another, this could be a way to kind of help you relate your struggles with what you're experiencing and how you can overcome those and be more efficient in the process. So the first thing that I had to kind of pick up on was that React wasn't HTML. And what I mean by that is, you can't just write the same HTML code in React that you can in a typical HTML document, if you will. So when I first started out, I was very confused as to why I got to include a class name if I'm writing a class. Why can't I just write class and it works just properly? But then I just kind of realized that, hey, I'm going to have to include the text class name. And so the other thing that I quickly needed to realize is that you're not writing just static code. You're basically writing functions and reusable code. So when you create a function and you're calling that function in a different component, you have to write it so that it presents itself as a function and not necessarily static HTML code. So it took me a minute to kind of understand that, hey, all of these are going to basically become reusable components, or all of these should be components that can be reused throughout the project, and I shouldn't have to write the same thing over and over. So instead of just writing this as a blog card on the home page, why don't I create a blog card component and that I can import or that I can use to map over to display data based upon the amount of cards that I have. And then I became to realize that, hey, not only can I just write a blog card component, I can write a blog card component that can be customizable with some conditional rendering based upon where the user may be at on the website, their subscription status, etc. So first thing was that I had to get out of the mindset that this is HTML and I am basically writing functions that need to be repeated. And if you look at a website and break it down into individual components, it makes it a lot easier to kind of write that code and think through that, hey, this isn't just HTML. Let me create a component. This component is a function. How do I want this function to react in this particular circumstance? So that kind of eased that learning curve and made it a little easier for me, if you will. The next thing was this whole use state, use effect, React hook management. Man, that stuff there was extremely difficult to kind of understand. First starting out, I'm like, man, why do I even need to use this whole use state, use effect thing? Like, I feel like I can just use variables, or I can store it in arrays and access that array in this particular component, and I can see the data that I want presented from that component onto this page or this file. There's no sense in taking the time out to spend with learning the use effect, use state, and all these other hooks, because this just seems confusing to me. Well, it actually is confusing, and if you're just trying to dive straight in or follow what someone else is doing without taking some initial baby steps to really understand how it works under the hood, then you will find yourself getting lost as your project increases in complexity and the application has larger demands based upon the type of app you're building and the end user experience. So what really kind of made the world of difference for me was really taking some time, going through the documentation and saying, hey, okay, you know what? let me start with this first use state. I'm going to have a count variable that's going to have the set count, and every time I click this button, it's going to increment by 1. And then if I refresh the page or if I change the page, this state maintains itself. Wherein if I were to use an array or a variable, if you refresh it and it's not being stored properly, it's not going to, or not being persisted, I should say, it's not going to be there once you refresh it. It's going to be gone. So it's not going to give you that it's not going to give you that storage feel, if you will. That's where something like state management, or use state, I should say, is extremely handy. So once I kind of broke it down and started with something extremely small, building on my own per the document so that I understood it, and then kind of gradually increased the difficulty and the complexity of it, it made a lot more sense to me at that point. So my suggestion to you is that just because it's complicated, and it probably is, and it's something new, it's expected to be, excuse me, uncomfortable during that learning process, but start small, build something small, build upon that, and don't be afraid to teach it to someone as well too, because if you're going to understand it to the standpoint that you could teach it to someone, then you should be able to apply it practically in any form of application. And like the last thing that really kind of helped me with my learning curve, specifically for React, is that understanding how JSX worked, and that you have to use classes, class name as design, but also when you're writing JavaScript, you have to include the curly braces to distinguish that this is going to be JavaScript, and you have to include your ands and your ternary operators and different things like that inside of the code, wherein with HTML, that is typically done in a separate file or within the scripts tag, and then it's incorporated through either an on-click handler or an on-click function or something to that extent inside of the actual web application. But with React, and JSX, you can actually include it inside of that JSX function. So it took a little bit of time to kind of understand how to integrate that. Where do you want to separate it out so that it becomes reusable? Where should you maybe not look to use it so that it doesn't impact the performance of your application? And just little nuances like that to kind of help my overall development experience and also give a better end user experience. So those are some of the things that kind of really helped, or that I struggled with initially when learning the JavaScript framework React, and kind of how I overcame it. I hope you found this to be beneficial and it's something that you could take away in your learning and coding journey. If you did, give me a like and feel free to leave a comment about some of the things that you struggled with in the comment section, and let me know what you'd like to see next. So with that said, I need to go ahead and jump in the shower, get ready to go to work, and I'll see you in the next video.